Hello, listeners, and welcome to this third and final part in the mini series on understanding a life of cultic influence. Here is Nicole. Well, sometimes things can be good for you until they're not. And then it's
Hmm.
okay to, and I think sometimes I speak to people who say that they were forever chasing either the love bombing feeling they experience when joining a group or the community aspect of a group that they were born and raised in, where they had these experiences, or they didn't want to leave because they loved the people that they were around and the community that they were a part of, but it was just the financial abuse, the psychological abuse, verbal abuse, and false teachings, or whatever the bad parts were. And it's the difficulty in weighing up, but if I leave, I can't perform on stage anymore. I can't make the audience feel the way that they feel when I'm performing, which is something that I love. So it's really difficult to also weigh those things up and say, like, can I stick out these abuses, intrusive phone calls, demanding timetables to still have this positive part in my life? And I guess that could be a reason why some people decide to leave an abusive church and check out a slew of other churches looking for that community without the abusive nature. Thankfully, some people I speak to manage to do that. It could be, leaving a dance group and trying out a few other dance groups in trying to hold on to the positive parts of what you were experiencing. So, I mean, I don't know if you had those thoughts or feelings, but I've been in situations that have been good and bad. And there is a point where you have to sit down and say, how bad is the bad? Because if it is really affecting me, my family, my mental health, if it's going to negatively impact me for the rest of my life, I can't survive in this environment. There have been other times where things have been good and bad, like places I've worked in where you love everyone you work with, you love your job, but your manager is just an asshole, and you're like, okay, well, I need money to live. Do I look for another job and end up with another manager like this, or do I stick this out because I love what I do and I love who I work with? So there are some sort of typical worldly experiences that I think listeners who haven't had cultic experiences may be able to identify in weighing up this good and bad and whether you should stay or not. And I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that is important to mention. And I'm glad you did, but that wasn't the only thing. I wasn't allowed to talk to ex-members either. Um, and there were some other very occulty things. And yeah, the leader was obviously dealing with some issues and trying to create a community, an intentional community. And I think I think to go back to what you're saying, the question is, can I still dance? Yes, of course I can. There are other ways to do that, and I wouldn't have to deal with how it was like in the studio in practice or being texted on the side by the director. There's going to be a way to do that without that particular unhealthy framework. So I think it's important for listeners to separate the activity, right? Whether it's dancing or going to church or a job or relationship from the manipulative framework and all of those red flags, because yeah, you can do all sorts of things without that framework. So yeah, that was a hard lesson, but it was important because I hadn't learned it yet. So as a joiner and being in the inner circle, it was a lot to process. um, the Not to say one's more difficult than the other because there are special issues from being born in a group.
Mm.
But the fact that I was listening to another podcast and I was listening because I knew I grew up in a cult, and this like light bulb went off in my head and I went, why does this apply to the group I just left to? Why did I join? Why didn't I know? I just brushed it off as, oh, I grew up like that. That's why I'm socially awkward, but it's not going to happen again. Right. And that's what compelled me, the confusion of that compelled me into my research and into educating myself. And and yeah, I just think it's so important for everyone, but especially children, to have access to this education, because had I not been told by my parents that I was in a cult, I wouldn't have believed anyone, I don't think. Um, yeah. And then had I not joined and figured out things from a joiner's perspective, I don't think I would have understood that I was vulnerable to do the same thing myself.
Right. And in terms of the the director and your former pastor, are there any parallels, direct parallels that you can draw between the two of them and their personalities and the way that they presented themselves?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that apart from the appearance of neatness, they were very, very similar. My pastor was a very neat person, presented himself as well put together. My director reminded me of somebody else's cult leader. I'm reading a memoir now, and they talk about how their leader is always drunk and going on these, tirades and tantrums. And who knows? I was not in the pastor's inner circle, so maybe he's different when his guard is down. I have no idea, but their behavior was definitely similar. And um, yeah, there were statements that she made that implied that she had been accused of being abusive in the past. She tried to swear me to secrecy about my experiences. She had used to try to convince leavers to come back, but had a very high turnover rate. Um, and yeah, the not being able to talk to ex-members, kind of trash talking everybody else in the community unless they just happen to be in her good graces at the time. The competitiveness, things like that for sure.
In terms of leaving this particular group, was there one big catalyst, or was it again the smaller things that were coming together to create that overall decision for you to leave?
Yeah, it was more of those little things. I was just tired of pushing away all those, gut instincts, like this is weird, like she's mean, like um why wouldn't she hire this girl that was asking too many questions about taxes? Why didn't she hire this girl because she was, too big for the current costumes? Why couldn't she just buy one that fit her? Um it was pushing all those questions away. The stress, like she was just constantly harping, and I had to do a lot of things in the studio to get through the evening or the day. Psychological tricks like imagining a protective bubble around me, chewing gum for confidence. And my best friend offered me her prescription drugs, and that was a line for me. And I was like, you know what? I shouldn't be at work just to get through it. And I'm definitely not going to start taking drugs. Um, yeah, that. And then there was a girl who left, and she said, it's just not what it is. She preaches positivity, but it's not. And that girl leaving gave me the courage to leave, because I knew I was going to lose all my friends, from that circle if I left. And unfortunately, I think she went back to it. Um, she's she's back there in a smaller capacity, but yeah, those things added up. I had health issues too. The stress was causing me nightmares and insomnia. I had my skin's immunity wasn't working as well. I had this mysterious condition that was kind of scary, because my doctor thought it might have been cancer, so I had to get screened for
Gosh.
cancer. But after leaving, after a few months, it just cleared up on its own naturally. And I got an answer from a dermatologist who explained this is a normal thing that most people can handle, but because of stress, immunity, blah blah blah. So um, yeah, that that was just all too much. It was just not sustainable as a hobby or a job or whatever it was supposed to be, which is unclear.
Was your life like when you exited this environment? Was there a period again of you feeling like you were like floundering or not sure what to do with yourself and all of this free time? Or was it more of a kind of like a liberation and you can just take ownership of other activities and things and family time, or maybe a combination of the two?
Yeah, it was actually disorienting. I didn't know what to do with myself because it had taken up so much time. And I even told a couple of girls, as I left, my excuse was supposedly that I didn't have time anymore. I said, I don't know what to do. I think I'm gonna miss it. And I even thought for a time that I wanted to go back, but I just intuited that things would be worse for me if I did. And I wasn't sure what happened. I was still blaming myself. I even after all those things that I told you about the leader's behavior, showing up to work drunk and saying all those negative things, and just not being a person who could like really um, handle imperfection and criticize constructively and targeted people. I didn't I thought that behavior was normal because that's how I grew up. And I thought it was all me. So my friend reinforced this. She told me that the directors or tax were due to me being weak, that I was making stuff up in order to leave, that I wanted to set the bar low so I didn't have to work hard. And I was surprised because when I talked to a few girls with her present, I had validation, verification, and amplification of these experiences with their own experiences. As I mentioned, somebody else brought up the word abuse. I was still confused, which I now know is because I was gaslit about the situation. But
Right.
I I had no context for that. So I was like, well, I need to work on myself. And I know I can't do it in this group. That was just too much for me. But why is it too much for me? I'm too weak. So I was confused until I heard about what makes a cult, or an abusive group. And I still had a lot of questions, like I said, why did everything that experts say also apply to my dance group, but not my hiking group or my community garden.
Right.
Um, if I had experience in a cult already and I knew what that experience was like, why did I stay for as long as I did and be miserable for as long as I did? So, yeah, I began my deep dive, which I am apt to do for a lot of things that confuse me, especially. And I loved it. I just, I it became not just about deconstructing my experience, but I realized how many people experience this and how little education the general population has. My parents, for example, who are smart people and normally very skeptical and do their research. But even I just saw this Nobel Prize winner on Twitter going down a conspiracy theory um, uh, rabbit hole. And yeah, everyone needs this education around coercive control because these subtle psychological influences that are normal to an extent. And yeah, they can be used to manipulate people to one person's personal aims.
We're often sharing resources and talking about different things. And there's a book club that's not exclusive and no one has to pay any money. And if you can't make it, that's fine. And there's no pressure to come. And it sounds a bit culty when I say to people, do you want to join our book club? But it's a great way to
It's a
come
club.
together. It's a great way to come together and just discuss some of our own thoughts and feelings around some of the stuff that we're consuming in the cult education space because we identify with the material so differently. And I think that's quite a beautiful thing. Of course, you and I are both going to have very different experiences when we read certain things, but your experience with Erica Borman, for example, who comes along to book club, her experiences with the material are also going to be very different to your experiences. So it's really interesting to see what comes out of those discussions when we're in book club. And if anybody wants to come along to book club, it's a safe space. And I'm not just advertising it as that. It's just a great way for people to get together and talk about their experiences with certain books, memoirs, research papers, I imagine at some point. And I really enjoy it. And you set that up, so I do appreciate that. It's a nice little thing to be a part of.
Well, thank you for supporting me in that venture.
I enjoy it because it also holds me accountable when I think, oh, I'll just read tomorrow. I'll just read the next day. And then I'm like, it's book club. I need to finish this book. So it's really good for that. And I appreciate the little nudge it gives me to stop procrastinating because I do that far too much.
Yeah, that's the idea, and that's hopefully an example of, a positive outcome of doing things in a group. But yes,
Yes.
you are free to not show up. You are free to not read the book, and it does not cost anything. And we meet just once a month, not several times a week. So yeah.
Not several times a week, but also you have to read the book. You have to read the book at least once every day. And there's a subscription, and you don't have to come. But if you don't come, you're not allowed back in the group. There's nothing like that. It's a nice little safe space. It's one of the things that we've talked about quite a lot before recording today is your hesitancy in sharing your story because you were worried that, or you had some thoughts on how your story is not as severe, in air quotes, as other people's experiences that have been shared on this podcast. And what you've just said about everybody having these experiences in smaller groups and these moments in their lives where things don't necessarily feel comfortable, and wondering how you navigate that and get around that. That's why these discussions are so important, and everybody's experience counts and everybody's experiences matter. And having a whole spectrum of conversations on this podcast reaches so many different people, and there are things that you've said today that resonate with me as somebody that hasn't had a cult experience. So I imagine that there'll be so many people listening that will feel validated through what you've said in their own experiences, and that's why it's important for everybody to share their experiences. And I don't think that we can put a severity level on anybody's personal and lived experiences, because it's all relative, isn't it? I mean, it's your life, it's your whole existence. And for anybody to be unsure of whether they should share their story because maybe people won't want to listen, or maybe you feel like you don't want to share because some people have had horrific, like sexually abusive experiences, and we haven't touched on any of that today, but maybe that means you shouldn't share your story. Absolutely not, everyone needs to share. Let's all keep sharing and widening the awareness and the education, and validating everybody's experiences. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that you just do so much on your own. Just there's no, I mean, I know we've spoken about interests in pursuing uh degrees, and going into further education in this specific field, but we don't have to be enrolled in those courses to be doing all of that stuff. So I just appreciate you taking that leap and coming to talk with me today.
Thank you. Yeah, and I hope that's one of the outcomes of this interview, because I want to help validate others with experiences that are just psychological in nature. As you know, I've had other abuses done to me, and I didn't want to talk about them today. But the my experience in my experience, the most harmful has been the psychological experience, and the things the that could be different for everybody, right? But particularly if you've experienced sexual abuse and physical abuse, if there's psychological experience abuse after that, such as gaslighting, and you're not validated, that can make it so much worse. So yeah, I hope that everybody can take something away.
I absolutely agree with you. I definitely think people will. I know that I have taken things away from our conversation today, and you just have such a calm and soothing presence about yourself. I know I've said this before, but you are just very soft when you speak, and I think I can be quite jarring and quite extroverted. So it's like sitting with somebody who is talks a bit calmer and a bit softer is really refreshing. And I just appreciate you as a person and for coming to chat with me. We have a little DM that we chat in on Twitter and regularly on emails and stuff. And I appreciate the support that you give me in the space. And I'm glad that we were able to connect. And I'm so thankful that you came to share your story today. When you emailed me and said, let's do it, I was like, yes, Nicole, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm happy too. And are you going to ask me if I have any additional advice for the listeners?
I am. How did you know? How did you know? So before we finish up today, Nicole, I just wanted to ask you if there was anything that you wanted to add for anybody that might be listening who is going through some similar experiences to the ones that you've had.
Thank you for asking. I did make sure I thought about this because I wanted to make sure I had some advice. As we talked about before, if you are going through something like this, don't feel like you need to stick it out. Listen to your gut. And if you have left a situation like this, physically or mentally, I recommend Take Back Your Life by Janja Lalich. That book has really helped me. And if you need to ask yourself some identity questions because you grew up in a cult like me, one question that I have loved to ask myself is what aspects of your personality did they try to squash? What was not acceptable? Working backwards from there can really help. You mentioned that I am a calm person. Maybe, I don't know. And I disagree that you're not a calm person because I like to listen to you before I go to bed. But I hope that didn't sound weird. Anyway, um I learned that I'm more quiet and they wanted me to be loud. And it's okay if I'm a more quiet person. And I also want to take that bit of advice that I've heard going around to read 5 books. And I want to say, try telling 5 people that you trust about your experience to validate you. I think each time you get validation is going to really help with your healing and deconstruction. So yeah, I think that's really helped me. So thank you, Casey, for being another person to listen to my story.
Thank you. You listen to me all the time. I get on my soapbox and I'm like ranting about things and blowing off steam. And I think it's important to find those safe people and have those safe spaces, even when we're doing this work, because it can be traumatizing, it can be triggering, it's exhausting, and there's a lot of dark material that is being worked through with all of this work that takes place. So it's so important to find those people. And I've said this before, if people are looking for people to have that with but can't find them, we are here, and you can reach out to me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com at any time, because there is lots of communicating that we can do, but also signposting to relevant and appropriate support groups, forums, specialists, counselors, therapists. There's a huge network at this point that we have access to, that we can help people also have access to, and it doesn't come with faux conditional love or money or any of those things. I mean, sometimes obviously counseling and therapy comes with money, but it doesn't, it doesn't come with the expectation that 10%, 30% of your income is going to have to be donated in air quotes to the cause. So there's so much that we can do to help people. And what you said about thinking about the special parts of you that make up who you are, think about how they were squashed, but also think about how they were exploited, because so many times when
Hmm.
individuals are recruited into groups, destructive groups, or who are plucked out of a group of individuals born and raised in a group and groomed almost for positions to continue that work and continue that indoctrination, and are deployed to recruit other people and evangelize to other people, or to shill propaganda, whatever form it takes. There are qualities within you that are special, that are identified by predators, that are abused, that are exploited. So think about the special things that make you you, and know that they are yours and no one else's. And I think that that is a great line to finish on today.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I do have experience with that too, and you're so right.
So thank you so much for your time, Nicole. Thank you for being you. I appreciate you so much, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Let me know if you end up doing what you wanted to do and how it was.
I will, and I'll let you know what it's like. It sounds a bit veiled. I was thinking about going to the cinema. I'll go to the cinema to watch a film that Nicole also might go to the cinema and watch. So it's not, it sounded a bit maybe like maybe it could have been a little bit rude, but no, nothing like that. If I end up going, I will let you know, and give you my nuanced review of the movie Oppenheimer, which is what I'm planning to go and see. in the
Yeah, that should
world,
be,
amongst worldly people, doing a worldly
yeah.
thing. Brilliant. Take care, Nicole. Speak to you soon. Bye bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.
That is the end of this mini series on understanding a life of cultic influence. To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.